In section 2.1, we talked about finding domaining range from an equation. Right now we're going to talk about if you're just given the graph. So remember, domain is related to your inputs, which are your x values. Range is all of the acceptable outputs that you might get from the function, so your y values. So when it comes to a graph, I think domain and range can best be summed up with some made-up words, 2 words each. For domain, I like to say that it is the leftist to the rightist of the graph. So domain is always leftist to rightist. If it's open circle at the end, you don't include it, you would put a parenthesis. If it's closed circle, you do include it, so you would put the square bracket. So the leftist that this graph goes is to -9. We can get a vertical line here to help us out. Just to see how far left it goes, you stop at the end. So the domain starts at -9. And then the rightist, furthest to the right that the graph goes, stops right here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it goes to 5. And that's the rightist, the furthest to the right the graph goes. Since it's a closed circle, you put a square bracket, and that's your domain in interval notation. For the range, it's a very similar concept, except range is your outputs, your y value, so it's the lowest value to the highest value. So the lowest point on the graph, that's right there. So our range is lowest to highest. The lowest is -1, 2, 3, 4, -5. It's a closed circle, so it is included. We can do a square bracket. And then the highest value, it's up here. The open circle is at 8. So it goes up to 8, but it does not include 8. So we put a parenthesis on it. So just remember, domain is leftist to rightist, and range is lowest to highest. If you remember that, that's all you need to know for getting domain and range from a graph. If you remember back to the 2.1 notes, the definition of a function was that it assigns each element in set A to exactly one element in set B. Exactly one is a key part of that. That means that every input can only have one output. You can't input the same thing twice and get 2 different answers. Every time you input that same thing, you get the same result. I like to think of the keyboard on your computer. Every time you hit the A key, the same thing happens every single time you push that. And that's true for every key on your keyboard. It always does the same thing every time you push that button, so every time you make the same input, you always get the same output. There's no surprises. So the keyboard on your computer is kind of like a function also. So what that exactly one output means is the vertical line test. If you can draw a vertical line and imagine dragging it all through your graph of your function, if at every point it only touches one part of the graph, then it's a function. If you drag that vertical line and it touches in multiple points, then it's not a function. So this graph on the left, that is a function. On the right, this is not a function because it touches in more than one place. So it's not a function. And lastly, what that means about a equation for a function is that you can solve for y and only get one answer. There's not going to be any plus or minus or anything strange like that. You get y equals something with an x in it. That would mean that y is a function of x if you can do that. So example A, is y a function of x? Well, if we can solve for y, it is. So let's add x squared to both sides to try to solve for y. Y equals x squared plus 2. Now we have solved for y. There's no strange things happening here. There's no plus or minus, nothing like that. So yes, it's a function of x. Y is a function of x. For example B, we're going to try the same thing. We're going to try to solve for y. So let's first move this x squared over. So we have y squared equals negative x squared plus 4. Now we need to get rid of the squared on the y, so square root, but that makes plus or minus, so we have y equals plus or minus the square root of negative x squared plus 4. In particular, this plus or minus means it's not a function. Y is not a function of x. And if we just think about that for just a second, we know x squared plus y squared equals 4. This is a circle with radius 2 centered at the origin, but we know circle is going to look like that, which means vertical line test is going to fail, so it's not a function.